A man who could kill lions with his bare hands, tear the gates of Gaza like they were nothing but curtains, was undone by a single stroke of hair in the dark. Not by enemies, not by war, but by a woman no one ever truly understood. Delilah, a name cursed at every altar. But what if she wasn't the villain? What if her betrayal was part of a deeper rite, a ritual that needed someone to fall, so a people could rise? Today, we don't just speak of strength. We speak of a man chosen from the womb not to live, but to die at the right moment. A hero not because of what he conquered, but because of how he surrendered. Before there was a warrior, before there was a curse, there was a nameless woman. A woman who lay on her back each night, staring into the dark sky, and begged for a child. She did not know she wasn't just asking for a baby. She was summoning an ancient promise, a covenant about to be written in blood. And so, Samson was born, his hair like divine roots growing deep into his soul. No one knew to be the strongest of all is to carry a loneliness no muscle can bear. This is where the story begins. Sit down, turn off the lights, and listen, for maybe your soul once knew this man, once heard his roar in the nights you couldn't sleep. Samson, the one chosen to fall before he had a name. Samson was already a longing unformed. Before the hair, he was the silent echo inside a woman no one bothered to name. Scripture doesn't record her name, not because she didn't matter, but because she stood for every barren woman who ever whispered to God and got no answer. At least, not right away. Her husband was Manoah, an ordinary man from the tribe of Dan. But in the eyes of the world, they were a failed couple. No children, no heir, no crying baby to prove the mercy of God. Until one day, under the scorching sun of the western hills, while she stood alone, the angel of the Lord appeared. Not to the man, not on some high mountain or holy temple, but right there where she stood, in the dust, in the ordinary. He didn't ask her name. He didn't want offerings. He didn't demand proof of faith. He simply said, "You will conceive, you will bear a son. He will be a Nazirite set apart for me from the womb, and he will begin to deliver my people from the hand of the Philistines." Every word struck like a hammer to the skull, not because it was frightening, but because it was too sacred. A barren woman, now becoming the vessel of the Almighty's covenant. But covenants never arrive gently. From that day on, she had to live differently. No wine, no unclean food, no dead flesh, and she must never cut her son's hair, not even once. Because every strand on that boy's head was a thread binding him to the Lord, each one a blood vow, and to cut it was to betray it. And then the child was born. She named him Samson. In Hebrew, it means little son or belonging to the sun. But deep down, she knew this child was never truly hers. He belonged to something older, a battle more ancient, and a destiny soaked in blood. Samson grew, but not like other children. When the others ran wild, he stood still. When they learned to shoot arrows, he learned never to cut his hair. When the older boys feasted and drank, Samson drank only water and kept silent. Inside him, there was always a call like thunder from the other side of time. His body was strange, stronger than it should be, faster than made sense, and always alone. Because to become the weapon of God, a man must learn to live as though he's already dead. Each night, Samson lay beneath his parents' roof and heard his mother whisper in dreams, "You were not born for peace, my son. You were born to destroy what mankind fears to even touch. But to destroy, you too will be broken." Samson never replied. He didn't need to. He knew from the moment he took his first breath, his fate and his soul no longer belonged to him. Samson had grown. His body thickened like mountain stone, his arms as if carved by sacred fire. People began to whisper he was no ordinary man. But Samson began to forget who he was. He went down to Timnah land of the Philistines. There, he saw a woman. Not a warrior, not an enemy, just a gaze that made him lose his way. He returned and spoke to his parents like a child begging for a toy. "I want her. Get her for me. She pleases me." Manoah turned pale. His mother said nothing, but her heart pulled tight like a drawn bow. Why would you choose a Philistine one who does not know the Lord? Samson didn't care. He thought it was love. But really, it was the first crack in the covenant. The wedding was arranged. Wine flowed. Tables opened. The Philistines laughed and danced, not knowing they feasted beside a sacred fuse about to ignite. At the wedding, Samson posed a riddle. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. No one could solve it, because only he knew it was the lion he once killed barehanded, in whose carcass bees had built a hive. The Philistines grew angry. They coaxed his wife, his first woman, to pull the secret from his lips. And she did. Samson was betrayed on the very night of his wedding. He went mad, killed 30 men, stripped them of their garments to pay his bet. From that night on, blood began to flow, not for duty, but for insult, for pride, for the wounds only a man can carry. Samson burned Philistine fields with foxes tied to torches. They killed his wife. He took revenge. They raised armies. He slaughtered them. The rage of one man became the spark of a holy war. But through it all, Samson could not see that every woman in his life was not just temptation, but a test from heaven. What he mistook for love was loneliness in disguise. Desire dressed in holy silence. One night, he entered Gaza, the most dangerous Philistine city, seeking a prostitute. That night, enemies encircled him. But as the night thickened, he rose, lifted the gates of Gaza like toys, placed them on his back, and carried them to the hilltop of Hebron like wrath made flesh. He did not die that night, but death began to take interest. For the man who cannot govern his craving, no matter how strong, has already placed the noose around his own neck. And then she came. Not a wife, not a harlot, not a prize, but Delilah, the woman destined to end the legend, not with a sword, but with a whisper. Delilah didn't enter Samson's life like a windstorm. She came like incense in an ancient rite, soft, warm, barely noticed, yet blurring the line between holy and dangerous. No one knew where she came from, only that she lived in the valley of Sorek, a borderland between Israel and Philistine, between light and shadow, between covenant and betrayal. She wasn't beautiful like a goddess. She was beautiful like a sorrow once buried in a mother's womb, the kind of beauty that made a man forget what he once promised God. The Philistine lords came to Delilah. No force, no threats, just an offer. Find the secret of his strength, so we may bind him, and we'll give you an amount no one can refuse. Delilah didn't answer right away, because, truthfully, she didn't want the money. She wanted something deeper to be known, to be feared, to be eternal in a story no one forgets. Samson loved her, not like the women before. This time, he let go completely. Delilah didn't rush. She didn't beg for secrets. She prepared the bed first, prepared her eyes, her laughter, her trust like a red carpet, inviting him in. And he walked in, light as air, like an old lion who still believed he was invincible. The first night, she asked if someone wanted to capture you, how would they do it? Samson laughed. Bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings, never dried. that night. He was bound as he slept in her arms. The Philistines rushed in. He rose and snapped the cords like dry grass. They fled. She wept. The second night, he lied again. Bind me with new ropes, never used. Again he slept. Again he was tied. Again he broke free. Again tears swelling in a woman's chest. You don't love me. You mock my heart. The third night weave my 7 locks into a loom. She did. He rose like a god. She cried louder, not from failure, but because she was drawing near, so near to a place no one had ever entered the heart of the giant. And then, the fourth night. No tears, no questions, only silence. A hand on his skin, and a whisper like Eve standing beneath the tree. If you truly love me, tell me what you've never told another soul. Samson sighed. His heart beat not with fear, but with exhaustion. Tired of always being strong. Tired of never having a place to fall without suspicion. Tired of living like one chosen, but never allowed to simply live. And he spoke, not with words, but with a bowed head, and a secret bleeding out like truth. My hair is the sign of a covenant with the Lord. If it's cut, I'll be as weak as any man. Delilah nodded. No tears, no smile. Only the quiet act of covering him with a blanket, like laying a cloth over a body ready for burial. She called them in, a barber, a pair of shears, a covenant about to be severed. Each lock fell, like strands of soul being snipped away. No one spoke, only the faint snip. Snip, echoing through the night, the sound of betrayal. And when Samson's hair touched the earth, the Spirit of the Lord left him, once and forever. The Philistines broke through the door. Delilah leaned in and whispered, Samson, wake up! Your enemies are upon you. He opened his eyes, and for the first time saw himself as just a man. Samson woke. No echo from heaven, no weight in his hands, no fire in his soul. Only Delilah standing there. No tears, no embrace, just a gaze like someone who's finished her role in a ritual that will never be repeated. The Philistines stormed in, no weapons needed, no schemes required. They seized him like a bull newly castrated. He didn't fight, didn't scream, only silence like a stain God had turned away from. And then, a blade thin, cold, wet with lamb's blood was thrust into his eyes. They stripped the light from Samson's soul. 2 hollow sockets like sacred wells now bone dry. From that moment on, he was chained, led like a dog, caged like a beast. He pushed the millstone day and night, round and round, as punishment for a pride that once believed itself untouchable. And that was when he began to hear the whisper of the Lord again. No more victories, no more women, no more admirers, just him and his guilt, and God and his silence. Each grind of grain was a day of regret, crushed to dust. Each turn a slow spiral back to what he had abandoned the covenant. One day, he touched his head, felt something no one noticed. His hair had returned. No one cared. The Philistines believed the Spirit had left him forever, but they didn't know God does not withdraw. He waits for the heart to return. And then the day came, a great festival. All the Philistine rulers gathered in the temple of Dagon. They raised cups, sang, danced not for their God, but to mock the God of Israel. Bring out Samson, they shouted. Let him entertain us, this blind fool who once made us tremble. He was led out by the hand of a child leading a giant. A picture of shame, or perhaps a divine metaphor. That he who once didn't know where he was going must now learn to walk like a child. Samson stood between 2 pillars. Still, listening to laughter, listening to insults, listening to the arrogant stones of Dagon's temple groan in self-disgust. He took a deep breath, placed his hands on the pillars, and prayed, not for revenge, but to be used one last time. Lord, remember me. Give me strength just this once, so I may die with your enemies. And then he pushed. One final thrust, not with muscle, but with tears. The pillars cracked, the ceiling shook, the ground roared. The temple of Dagon collapsed, all buried under the final fury of a blind man. Samson died, but in that death he was victorious more than he had ever been in life. Not for how many he killed, but because for the first time, he knew. True strength was never in the hair, never in the hands, but in surrender. The temple of Dagon collapsed like a mountain whose roots had been severed. Stone pillars crumbled, walls etched with foreign gods turned to dust like ash after holy fire. Samson, the man who once burned hundreds of fields, who slaughtered thousands alone, now lay still, amid the wreckage of his enemies and his own flesh. No shouting, no applause, only dust, blood, and the silence of divinity leaving a defiled place. Israel heard the news. The people couldn't believe it. The one once stoned for marrying a foreign woman was now mourned like a martyr. They came, lifted his body from the ruins, buried him beside his father, Manoah in the ancestral soil, as if to close a covenant that had snapped, and now was stitched again in blood. That death was victory, not because the Philistines were wiped out. They weren't. They remained, still strong, still ruling parts of the land. But the spirit of fear they had planted in Israel's heart was drained, like blood from Samson's corpse. And Delilah. No one speaks her name again in Scripture. No funeral, no trial, no epilogue. She vanished like all shadows do when the sun rises. No one knows if she died in terror or lived long in luxury. Only this no one remembers her face. Only that her hand once cut the sacred thread that bound man to God. But was she evil or a tool unaware that she was completing a necessary rite? For if not for Delilah, Samson would not have fallen. And if he had not fallen, he would never have surrendered. And without surrender, God could not have used him to the end. And that is the heart of this tragedy. Sometimes, God doesn't seek the perfect to fulfill his will. He seeks those willing to be broken, not to die in failure, but to die as a ritual that opens the door for others to live. After Samson, Israel had peace, not forever, not long, but long enough for children to be born without growing up afraid, long enough for farmers to raise hoes without glancing over their shoulders. And the soul of Samson was no longer a madman, no longer a failed warrior, but a bridge between the time when men fought each other and the time when men would have to fight themselves. He once thought strength came from muscle, once thought love was a feeling, once thought destiny was found only in battles he could win. But in his final breath, he knew only in weakness can a man make space for God to become strong within him. Some deaths don't end anything. They begin. Samson's death didn't just bring down a temple, it opened the door to a truth Israel had long forgotten. God doesn't need the strong, he needs the obedient. People remember Samson for his strength, but what made him immortal was that moment between the pillars, blind, humiliated, broken when he still dared to pray. Remember me. Not the cry of a warrior, but the whisper of a soul that had finally learned who its master was. From a child promised by an angel to his mother, to a man betrayed by the very desire he chose, Samson traveled a painful circle from being chosen to do something great, to being crushed to become something sacred. He killed lions, burned fields, struck down thousands, but he never defeated his hunger to be loved. And that hunger never placed on the altar became the blade that severed the covenant. And Delilah, don't rush to curse her. She was more than a betrayer. She was the shadow God permitted to enter the lives of the chosen, not to destroy, but to test where their hearts truly belonged. Everyone has a Delilah, something that makes us forget what we promised God, something that blinds us before we ever lose our sight. A gentle hand, holding scissors to the sacred parts of our soul because we were the ones who laid our heads in its lap. This story isn't just about Samson, it's about you. Are you strong, really, or are you just running from holy surrender? Are you afraid of failure or of your ego breaking apart? Is your hair still intact while your covenant with God rots from within? Samson didn't die because of Delilah. He died because he placed his soul in another's hands before he placed it in God's. And only when he was blind, chained, mocked, did he finally see who he truly was. His story might be yours if you're brave enough to ask. Where does my strength come from? And am I willing to become weak so God can be strong in me? Samson was not a loser. He was the first to dare die, to conquer himself. And that is what turned legend into ritual, and a name into a warning for generations to come. And if you're still here, maybe your soul has heard something from deep within, from beyond the edges of time. At Tales of Black, we don't tell stories just to tell them. We tell them to awaken blood that's fallen asleep, to lead wandering souls back to where they belong. If this story stirred something in you, take a few seconds. Subscribe to Tales of Black Like It if you felt this was a truth that had been buried. Leave a comment, tell us which part woke you up, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because what you just heard might be the key to awakening another soul. Tales of Black. We speak the truths that were once erased. And remember this, every story is a soul not yet laid to rest, and you are the one who lets it be told one last time as a ritual of release.